Hi and welcome everybody. We are having a runoff primary in May next month. My name is Theresa Opeka. I'm with Carolina Journal, and today we have one of the candidates for the Republican ticket for State Auditor, Dave Bouliek, and want to welcome you here today.
Great, thanks for having me, Theresa.
Thanks so much for coming. So, got a few questions for you, and so the public can get to know you better and your qualifications, and we'll go from there. So, like I said, had a busy primary, and now we're coming off to a runoff, second primary as they call it.
It's very exciting.
Yes, great, great. So Dave Bouliek, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are from, and where you grew up, stuff like that, your background.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Sure.
I am a lifelong North Carolinian. I've lived in about 13 different communities across the state of North Carolina throughout my life. I was actually born in Lincolnton.
Okay.
Went to high school in Durham. And have lived for the last 27 years in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where I've practiced law and run several businesses. I am a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I earned a law degree and a master's in business administration from Campbell University. Have a wonderful wife for the last 29 years, Hayden, and we have 4 great children, 2 of which thankfully now are off the family payroll. So we're excited about that.
Sure, sure. Sure, great. Now I read your family background. Your family had some media, radio, TV background?
My father was a news reporter for, we started in radio, went to Greensboro and worked at WFMY in Greensboro, and spent most of his career at WTVD here in the Triangle area.
Okay, okay, and that's neat. That's neat.
Yeah, it's fun. I grew up sort of getting to go with him to certain events, so it was a lot of fun. He covered Raleigh, and he covered the General Assembly and the governor's office, covered Governor Martin when Governor Martin was in office, and so I got to tag along several times, so that was a great experience growing up.
Yeah, yeah, so you became very familiar with the General Assembly and all the inner workings of, government in the state.
Did.
Yeah, yeah, so you mentioned some of the jobs and you've had. Any offices have you held?
Yeah, so that's really what has spurred me to run for state auditor. Is for the last several years I've been involved at my alma mater, my undergraduate alma mater, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I've chaired their board of trustees at UNC Chapel Hill, and instead of taking a traditional track of asking kind of non-pointed questions, I took the approach, along with several other members of the board, of asking some really tough questions and taking some really different stands at the university in an effort to move the university away from a far left track.
Okay, okay. And what ways are you looking or helping to look that way?
Well, started ironically enough on the first day as a trustee, hearing that at the time, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill was being operated on 16 separate budgets.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was a misstatement.
Right.
And I see your hesitation when I said that. But in fact, there were 16 separate budgets running the university. And I had, I've spent time as a prosecutor, so I've been a prosecutor, I've been in traffic court and done murder cases. I had a judge one time tell me that just because something looks stupid doesn't mean it's not on purpose. Okay. And I felt along with some of my fellow board members, that needed to change. And so we endeavored to work with the administration to make those changes, and in fact, we're successful. Consolidated that budget into one forward-looking budget, which I tell people it's not really rocket science. It's stuff that county governments and municipalities across the state of North Carolina do regularly, but the university, quite frankly, wasn't doing it. In the process, we discovered a $100 million structural deficit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so after some hard work and cooperation with the administration and the board really leading on that, we were able to clean that deficit up, and today, several years now looking forward, the university itself is running a slight surplus because of some really good fiscal management. That budget model, by the way, has now been accepted by all of the system university schools. And so we call it an all funds budget, and it's been very successful. The rating agencies, for example, Standard & Poor's, have given us notes on the fact that the budgeting process that we currently have gives them confidence in the university's financial position moving forward. Oh. That's one of the things that really spurred me on. I also introduced this time, January last year, something called the School of Civic Life and Leadership. Okay. Which is I went on Fox News, for example, and an interview right after doing that as chairman of the board, and said that the School of Civic Life was an effort to remedy the fact that there's not a shortage of liberal professors on the faculty at UNC Chapel Hill. And I was told it would never happen. We were opposed at every turn, even by accreditors in Washington, D.C. We hired our dean last month, and in the National Review, well-respected conservative magazine, actually April the 8th, a write-up about how influential that school is and will be moving forward to universities across the country. So it's something that our board and myself personally am very proud of leading the effort on.
Yeah. So you've had a lot of accomplishments.
And that's what I tell folks about Council of State jobs. And Council of State jobs really are about a couple things. One, in my opinion, having courage to stand up and do what's right for the people of North Carolina in the face of opposition. Once you have the courage to do it, you've got to also be able to follow through and get stuff done. And I've been fortunate and blessed to have a lot of people. You don't do this stuff alone. A lot of fellow board members at Chapel Hill and people that we've worked with to make these things happen. With that in mind, I felt like I could maybe give a stab at doing it on a statewide level, and the state auditor's office looked like an appropriate place for me to take that kind of attitude to.
Okay, so say you win the runoff, you win the second primary next month in May, and you win the general election. What would your first order of business be on day one?
Well, it's a good question. I appreciate you asking about it, because the state auditor's race and the state auditor's office, I believe, is one of those important offices that, quite frankly, not a lot of people talk about. Mm-hmm. And it is something that has a lot of influence across the state. And the auditor's office does three things, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Okay. First, financial and accountability audits. And most people, when you say that, you think auditor, yeah, it's probably what you do. Track the money, make sure taxpayer money is being spent like it's directed to. But the auditor's office is also authorized to complete two other types of audits. One of those being economy and efficiency audits, and the other an audit of program results. So in looking forward, what I have talked about on the campaign trail are 3 or 4 areas that I think the state auditor's office can really step up on. One is election integrity. I think the state auditor's office is uniquely situated as appropriate to help give the North Carolina public, the citizens of North Carolina, confidence that our elections are run above board. I'm not saying that every board of elections or that every single election is not run correctly, but I've traveled the state from Murphy to Manio, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of distrust about our election system. And I think that auditor's office is uniquely situated to be that agency that can audit the state board and can audit county boards of elections to look at 4 things. One, scrubbing the voter rolls. Are our voter rolls accurate? Second, looking at the technology and the machines. Are they being operated properly? Not going in with the attitude that you're going to necessarily find something. Go in with an open mind and take a look, are these being operated properly? Also, taking a look at the processes and procedures of the State Board of Elections. Is there a uniform process being applied across the state of North Carolina to elections? when we are able to take a look at that, I think that would also, give people confidence that there's one way things are operating. And the final thing that we can look at in an audit is the voter tabulation. There's 2 documents created with every vote. In an absentee vote, there's an envelope and there's a ballot. Those should match up. There's also an authorization to vote and then your actual ballot when you go vote in person. Those 2 pieces of paper should match up. Not really that difficult to look at, but I think it's something that should be done. Also, with respect to efficiency, I think we can all agree that government can be more efficient. I always say, can I get an amen that the DMV needs to be audited? It really should not be that hard to get a driver's license in the state of North Carolina or to change your address.
Right.
And our legislature appropriated dollars to work on the efficiency of the DMV, and quite frankly, I think they failed in that effort. I think an efficiency audit of the DMV is absolutely necessary and called for, and the state auditor can do that. Further, I think that NGOs, non-governmental organizations, should be audited, and they should be audited to make sure that folks who are here illegally are not getting benefits from state taxpayer dollars. I think that fits squarely in the lane of the state auditor's office, and I would pledge to do that as the state auditor.
Okay. So you touched on a few different areas, and I'm just going to go back really quickly to the one that you mentioned about the election. Like, people don't have a lot of trust as far as elections. Is that overall for the state board or county boards, or is it in general?
I think it's a combination of the 2.
Okay.
The state auditor's office, again, I think is uniquely situated as an independently elected office.
Sure.
And can provide the ability to audit not only the state board and what they do and the procedures that they are putting out to county boards, but can take a look at the county level and are we running our elections in a uniform manner? Are we doing things with regularity? To use general auditing standards, right? To take a look at that, you do generally accepted auditing standards when you take a look at, and you would take a look at each procedure to make sure that there's an appropriate checklist, so to speak, or an operations manual of how we're going to conduct our elections. There's not a lot of money put toward election integrity in the state of North Carolina. I just don't think it's really bubbled to the top. But I will tell you, as I travel the state of North Carolina, it has become clear that voters do not have a tremendous amount of confidence in the integrity of our elections. And I think, putting an audit system in place can give people confidence. And if you don't have confidence, you tend not to vote. And we want people to go vote.
Right.
So we want to be able to give them confidence in our voting system, and the more confidence the voting public has, the more voters we're going to have actually go cast a ballot. And in a democracy and in a democratic republic, we need people to go vote.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there just was a statewide single audit released. I know there were different departments mentioned, but the state election board was not one of them. I haven't heard of an audit in quite a while, or?
There's some statutory quirks, but I don't believe the State Board of Elections has been audited in more than a decade.
Okay.
And that's the last information I had. Day one, that's on the priority list.
Okay.
Absolutely has to be done. And again, I say that not because I have some personal reason to go audit the election board. I hear this from voters.
Right.
I've been on the campaign trail now for the better part of 8 months, and I have heard from voter after voter, they just don't have confidence in our voting. And that's not to say that there aren't great people working in election boards across the state of North Carolina, doing fantastic work with the greatest level of professionalism and integrity.
Sure.
It's that for whatever reason, people just don't have trust in that. And so I think the auditor is uniquely situated to be able to give the voter in North Carolina that confidence that their elections are being run fairly and appropriately.
Okay, so getting back to the office itself, Yeah, we had in the past, for the longest time, we had State Auditor Beth Wood, and now we have Jessica Holmes. What you see is being done, like, give them props. That's been they're doing a good job. What do you think is so far in that office, in the office itself, over the last few years?
Well,
It's working well. Yeah.
Right. As I travel the state, I have heard from several people that there were many audits that Auditor Wood had done that were quality work, and that she had stepped in appropriately. In many cases at municipal levels, which I think is a really important job of the state auditor, is to step in at the municipal and county level when needed. But the current state auditor, Jessica Holmes, she's the disappearing auditor. I've not seen a thing from her. I would point specifically to the Durham public school system.
Okay.
I firmly believe that when you have a situation like what's going on in Durham, and what's going on in Durham is that staff members were paid,
right,
and evidently the finances were not there to cover the additional raises, and the shortfall is north of $60 million. And neither the administration in Durham at the public school system nor the school board will really give the public a firm answer on exactly what's going on. That is an instance where I believe a strike force from the state auditor's office would be appropriate to show up at the front door of the Durham public schools and say, we're here to tell the public what's going on,
right,
because they deserve an answer. School kids missed class, school was closed, we had a disruption in schedule. That's where leadership is important, and you've got to step up to the plate. As state auditor, I would have stepped in on that because I do think that the public deserves an answer. And then it's the recommendation and the findings in the audit that create the forthcoming action, whether there's misfeasance or malfeasance. Misfeasance, you can deliver that to the governor's office, you can deliver that to the General Assembly, you can deliver that to the state school board. You can also deliver it to the county commissioners in Durham, for example, and publicly deliver it and say, here's what we find. If it's malfeasance, it can be delivered to the district attorney or the attorney general's office for criminal prosecution. I'm not saying there is any malfeasance. I'm saying if you had those two types of things, and I think a strike force in the state auditor's office would be very beneficial to the people of North Carolina.
Okay, okay. Any other areas that you think are not working well in that office?
Well, I think there's a lack of modernization in the office, and I don't know that you can point your finger at one individual and point any blame. I would simply say that we need, as a state, to invest in modernization. I'm a pro-technology person, so long as we use the technology correctly. And technology in the state auditor's office, I think, is extremely important. You can bring in AI systems, artificial intelligence systems, that deal with large amounts of data. And you can have that data siphoned through artificial intelligence programs that sort out huge data sets and by doing that, you can demonstrate certain patterns where there might be fraud involved. Medicaid system, for example, is so big it would be logistically impossible to send human teams in to take a look at mounds and mounds of data. But with new AI technology, you can extrapolate data, huge data sets, take those data sets, and if you ask the right questions, you can determine whether there are patterns of fraud and abuse. And once you identify those patterns and can identify where that fraud and abuse is occurring, that's when you send the human teams in to drill down and take a closer look.
Okay, so some people hear the word AI and they get a little concerned. How would you alleviate people's concerns if you said you're working in the office, you're the state auditor, you're going to be using AI? How would you alleviate those concerns?
Well, I mean, I think the way you do that is you be transparent with the public, is exactly what you're doing. I mean, AI used incorrectly, I think, is a bad thing. but artificial intelligence is not necessarily artificial intelligence. It's more really, really fast computer systems that can sort really, really large data sets quickly, accurately, and can go in and determine certain patterns. It would be up to the human programmers and the leader in the office to say to the computer, for example, this is what we're looking for, find and determine whether these patterns exist. So if it's used correctly, it can really be an important tool to fight corruption and fraud.
Okay, all right. Another subject, do you see any areas in state government that you feel are wasting taxpayer money right now?
Oh, goodness.
Loaded question.
Well, I think, I mean, I've been very sort of outspoken at the university level that I think efforts surrounding DEI are a waste of taxpayer dollars. Okay. I don't see anything, in my experience, I'm not seeing anything that is giving taxpayers return on investment. I find, particularly at the university level and in our secondary schools, DEI efforts tend to do a couple of things. One, they tend to create unnecessary bureaucracies of people who are there to, I'm not sure exactly what they're supposed to do, but they create jobs and bureaucracies that I find not very productive. And then the second thing DEI does is it becomes divisive. And it creates divisiveness and it chills freedom of speech. It chills people's ability to feel like they can express themselves and be themselves. It promotes a specific type of culture, and that is just not, it's not productive. And I think that right there, if you want to know my number one waste of money, that would be it. Anything that has to do with DEI.
Yeah, and we are seeing a lot of talk about that now with the UNC system and other areas that DEI is coming under fire.
Well, that's true. And in fact, I've called for it to be stripped from the UNC Chapel Hill budget.
Okay. Any other areas besides that?
Well, I wouldn't want, as you know, as somebody who's running for state auditor, I've staked myself out on a couple of things. One, that is, I think the Board of Elections needs to be audited. I think DMV needs to be audited for efficiency, and there are other areas at the Department of Transportation I think that would fit under that umbrella as well. For example, it really shouldn't take multiple months or years to get a turn lane put in for if a development, for example, has already been approved. Right. And I hear those horror stories across the state as well. And I've staked myself out on looking at NGOs. But it would be unfair as someone running for the auditor to presuppose that there are specific areas where taxpayer money is not being used correctly. I think the right approach is to go in and take a look at it with an open mind and say, all right, we're gonna look at program results, for example. That's a type of audit. And we're gonna audit the program and we're gonna determine what type of return on investment taxpayers are getting. If taxpayers aren't getting an appropriate return, I think it's incumbent upon the auditor to give a recommendation to defund the program. That would go to either the governor's office or the legislature. And then we repurpose that money for things like filling potholes and building bridges. But until you get in there and take a look, it would be unfair for me to sort of pinpoint. I do, however, think the DMV is not efficient. I know I've said that now twice, but I've experienced it personally, and I hear it from everybody.
Okay. One last question for you.
Sure.
Straight to the point. Why should someone vote for you?
Well, a couple things. One, I am a lifelong North Carolinian. I know North Carolina. I have lived from the mountains to the coast. I am very experienced. I have spent 27 years practicing law. During that time, I've also run businesses. I've signed the front of a paycheck, and I've got the gray hair to show for it. And those who sign fronts of paychecks know what I mean when I say that. I've raised a family, so I've got that experience, and I think that's good experience having raised a family. I feel like I've matured. I've got the maturity to be in the office, to lead the office. Look, I don't anticipate going into the state auditor's office with a Ziploc bag full of number 2 pencils and sitting behind a desk and going through numbers. The elected state auditor ought to go in, evaluate the team, decide what team is necessary, create a culture, build a strategic plan, and lead the organization toward results. That's what I've done my whole career. I'm a problem solver. I've spent my whole career solving problems. I've spent certainly several years leading large organizations with large budget numbers. As a person with a master's degree in business administration, I understand finance at the detail level. I understand audits at the detail level. Heck, I created an audit committee at the University of North Carolina because we didn't have one. And that committee has been very successful. So I feel like my experience, my courage to stand up for what's right for the people of North Carolina, and my knowledge of the state really are the top 3 reasons why folks should vote for me for state auditor. I won't let them down.
Okay, all right. Dave Bouliek, candidate for the Republican ticket for state auditor. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.